Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's Christian B here in Burnaby. You're joining myself and three other fantastic realtors. We have EJ Bugayong joining us from Richmond. We have Tyson Kleem joining us from the Fraser Valley, and Norm Hiller joining us from Vancouver East. Like myself, they live in these areas, but they also travel outside these areas and will service areas like Vancouver, Burnaby, and so on. Okay, gentlemen, let's jump into the topics today. And all right, so I was online and I see on the Wall Street Journal that Bitcoin is up to $61,000 a coin, gentlemen. Had you invested, I think it's up 51% in the last half a year or year. So folks are making a pretty good return. I know that some guy's going to walk into my open house here in the next 6 months, and he's going to tell me about how it's over for Vancouver real estate. That's a bubble. No, the way or a version of they're saving their down payment through the use of Bitcoin. Have you seen anything like that? And if someone were to come to you and suggest that, what would you say?
Yeah, I think it's a very good kind of question because I've kind of kept tabs on it a little bit. I remember I was in an open house, and one of the photographers that used to do some of our listings over there, I asked him, "Hey, are you in real estate at all?" He's like, "No, actually, I'm just kind of in crypto." I'm like, "Well, what's that?" And he kind of did a lot of my listings for that year. And I think it was part of 2017, and it kind of crashed. And I remember I had booked him in, and I said, "Okay, what are you going to do now that it crashed? Like, you're done." And here we are, like 7 years later. And when I look back at what it was at 2017, I'm like, oh my goodness, I should have done something, because I obviously didn't. And yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see where it's at. I haven't had anybody say, "Hey, I've got a bunch of Bitcoin, I want to kind of buy something," but some of those early adopters could be have quite a bit of money, and but I think the hard thing for them is you don't want to sell, right? Like, you kind of think, I know, heard some people say it's going to go to 250,000 or a million one day. And I think we're at, like, I think at the time of recording, I took a look and it was like $63,000
Mhm.
US a coin.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see what would happen. If somebody did come into an open house and say, "Hey, I got some Bitcoin," I wouldn't try to find out exactly how much they had, but I'd say, take some of those profits, get into real estate if you don't have anything, because, long term, especially our market at the Greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley, with the amount of people who are still coming in, I still think everybody needs a place to live. And I think real estate is still a very good long-term investment.
Mm.
Yeah, every financially responsible person I know, or wealthy person, and I have some family who are in the finance industry as well. They say crypto really is a casino. It's unregulated. It's highly volatile. Yes, you can make money out of it, but you can also lose a lot of money out of it. Um, and so I think we're definitely in the early wave, I think, when it comes to crypto, and I think there is something about investing something in it, but it has to be stuff that you're willing to lose. But most people, again, like I was saying, who are wealthier, are very pro invest conservatively. That gives you that's a bit of security in there, and then you get the consistent gains every single year, and then that's, over the years of the compounding effect of that, you become a lot more wealthier than trying to do the gasoline on a fire, and then try and cash out at the right time, before the flame goes down again. And already, like, you're seeing Bitcoin, I think, was up, I think this morning or yesterday, we're around 60, something, $7,000 US, and now it's already down to 60, just broke past 63,000. So it's highly volatile. I think it's also highly manipulated because it's not regulated. And so I think you got to be so careful with crypto.
Tyson, along with what you said, I think a lot of old school investors are conservative, look for that consistent growth, and there's just nothing sexy about it. People like to talk about how they, tripled their money in 3 weeks type of thing. And, I think that's the huge appeal to cryptocurrency. And I think in our age group, unless people are very techy or, open to new ideas. I know for myself, I'm surrounded with a lot of people who, feel they got ripped off with Bitcoin. They lost their password and oops, it's gone. Stuff like that. So, there's a lot of people that are kind of upset about it, and it is what it is. I think they've kind of cut their losses and moved on. And it's incredibly volatile for, a lot of people who just aren't comfortable. They're not built for that. So I can see the appeal of it, but at the same time, I think if you've made some money, count your blessings, take some of that money and, diversify.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things you don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And so and I would say never leverage yourself into crypto. Um, but I think there is a play like I'm a bit more on the pro crypto side when it comes to things, but you have to be so careful with what you're investing into it. And so yes, you can make a lot of money. I think we're on the early wave of it. I think we're still trying to figure things out with it. I think people are still trying to understand it. You ask your average person what they understand about what is crypto and what is the use base for it and other things, and a lot of people have no idea, and so it's still relatively new, and we're in new waters, uncharted waters with it. I've heard people say it's the internet of the 90s or so, when if you invested into the internet like back then, into .com things, or into, let's say, Microsoft or Apple. It's kind of similar to that, but it depends on which area of crypto you're investing into.
Sounds like you're
I-
signing up for an ulcer, an emotional roller coaster when you're with the volatility that you get with crypto. 63,000, 57.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it. I know when I owned more individual stocks, you're just naturally attracted to the ocean of information you get on the news about the stock, and you're watching it go up or down. And these days I just put everything into very boring, plain vanilla index funds and Vanguard index funds, and I just find it lets me sleep at night. So it's got to pass the sleep at night test
Yeah.
for myself.
I
And
don't notice a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I remember, but it was a year or two ago, I bumped into a realtor who said that his client had saved their down payment through Tesla stock and was then using that money as the down payment. Hey, great, that worked out for that person. But I also met somebody this week, the potential buyer who lost $100,000 on Tesla. So it kind of works out, and I think there's a survivorship bias here. You hear about the odd guy who made 100 grand on crypto, but you don't hear about the 5 people who lost 50K.
Exactly.
I sure hope these people that are using stocks to buy real estate are pulling out their money and then shopping, not committing to a purchase, removing subjects. Oh, let's try it for 2 more days, and then it tanks.
Yeah.
That would be not good at all. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard about people mining Bitcoin for a very long time. I remember walking into a showing once into a condo, and they had about 6 or 7 computers with the fans blowing and, trying to cool down the computers. And the whole condo was hot. They had windows open because they were trying to make money, mining Bitcoin. So I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard of or seen any of that in an awfully long time.
I think the
Was that
net
a
gain
tenant or
from
was that
it.
an owner?
Sorry?
Tenant or owner?
I believe it was an owner, not sure.
The net gain from it now, with the cost of power and all that sort of stuff, I don't think is there as much anymore. I think in BC we have a big Bitcoin farm up in some remote community up on the coast, where it was an old mill town, and they had built a hydro dam to service and power that community, and now a Bitcoin farm moved in there, and they're drawing power from that dam that's still usable to be their power source for them. In a way, it's free power. So that's an ingenious idea. But other than that, I think for the average mom and pop, it's the price of power to draw and mine the Bitcoin. The margins are not as profitable as they once were.
Okay. Okay. Gentlemen, let's move on. We've got the BC government brought out a budget recently, and in the budget, they threw first-time buyers a big bone, and that is the property tax exemption. So there's two. one for resale and one for pre-sale. For resale, the property tax for transfer tax exemption jumps from 500,000 to 830,000. So effectively, if someone were buying an 830K condo, the buyer would be saving $8,000. Nice. For pre-sales, the exemption jumps from 750,000 to 1.1 million, which makes sense because it's pretty hard to buy anything, even a 2-bedroom in pre-sales under 1 million in a major area. A couple of questions. One would be, what took this so long?
Yeah.
And what kind of impact do you see this having on the market? EJ.
Not all at once, guys.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like anytime I kind of met with first-time home buyers, kind of in the past, we kind of went over kind of all of the benefits and whatnot, and I said you also have access to, this property transfer exemption, and then we always kind of chuckled because we're like, we're not even close to even getting this. And then what was it, a sliding scale from 500,000 to 525,000, and like, it's been a long time where they probably should have changed it. It's nice for some first-time home buyers to kind of get, but if you still kind of look at the price points for people to get in, it's helpful that they get this exemption, but the mortgage costs, the costs of buying a property and whatnot is still very high. So it's great, but is it really going to have any kind of impact on the market where all of a sudden there's more inventory and everyone's like, hooray, like we can all get into place? I really don't think so, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's a good move by the government to at least provide more room. You're right by saying like, why didn't this happen sooner? It should have happened sooner because prices have been inflated like this for years already at this point. So yeah, but like what EJ's saying is the amount to be able to save. Like the hardest part is the down payment for people, and to be able to save. So it's nice to have the extra 8K to put towards your down payment. But for some people that there's so much more that they have to make up to be able to get into a place or to get the mortgage on something like that. And so it's definitely a challenge for sure.
For me, it's been years since any first-time home buyers actually made any use of it. Like a few years, not just 1 or 2. It's been a few years. So none of my first-time home buyers have used it at all. I personally think we're looking at the numbers. It makes sense today, but give it another few years, it's going to be dated yet again. What's the negative of maybe just saying, like province-wide, any new construction, no PTT, and any first-time home buyers, no PTT for new or resale?
Yeah,
That accelerate home construction and people start to, pursue new construction a little bit more and, entice builders to start building. I think we need to get ahead of it as opposed to kind of like similarly how we build a bridge or a tunnel. Oh, we need 4 lanes. Let's build 4 lanes. No, let's build 6. So we're good for the next 25 years. They're not going to amend this, and raise it for, I would probably say it's safe to say another 10 years at least. They're going to leave it as it is.
Yeah.
Do you know what the property transfer tax is in Alberta?
0.
Yes.
0. I know it's 0. I don't know why it's 0. It's insane that we're still doing this, and they will never get rid of the property transfer tax here because it's such a huge amount of money that the government gets. So this is a bit of like reactionary policy to get the to help first-time home buyers, but they need that property transfer tax because of how high real estate is over here. It's a lot as you kind of go through it with your clients and they're buying a $1.2, $1.4 million place, and you say, hey, just to let you know, this is the property transfer tax. They probably already know, but we kind of confirm with them. And it's huge when you look at the amount of transactions that are happening every day. It's a lot of money. And to see how another province, they're not even taking advantage of that, not even taking advantage of it, but even using it, it just kind of shows that it's challenging for our for people over here because that unfortunately isn't, I don't think, in my opinion, is going to go away because it is such a money generator for BC.
Well, this podcast just made me lose a few clients to Alberta, but that's okay.
That's okay. We've lost a number who are made the move out of province this year to Alberta for not because of property transfer tax, but just because cost of living is much better. So here's the interesting thing with this. So they say the government says that with this, it's could affect up to 14,500 people per year. So you're telling me that there's 14,500 people per year out of, and I was just looking, I just did a quick Google search of how many transactions in BC last year. There's 73,000 real estate transactions last year. And so I'm looking to go and say, so 20% of the people or so roughly are first-time home buyers in the market. I'm curious to know if that's actually going to be a reality or not, or if their numbers are a little optimistic as far as how many people that will actually affect.
So if that's 14,500 people that are going to get an $8,000 exemption, that's $116 million. But
yeah,
I don't know about that number.
Hmm. Does this push up demand? Does this push up demand now that you've got a whole swath of buyers who will save up to $8K in resale and more in presale?
I think the nice thing about it is buyers may end up stretching themselves a little bit more to get into a longer term home, reducing costs yet again. So I think it's a huge help. Is it going to bring up demand? It's not going to have that $500,000 to $525,000 push where, you know, people are really fighting to get it under the 5 to 525 mark. It's going to be, you know, a little bit of a larger scale. It's the 835 to 860 now, but again, as long as you're underneath that threshold, you're saving a lot. It's very ambiguously worded. We can go over that in a minute, but I think it's definitely going to help a huge amount. It's now with the way it's worded, I think that scale is opened up quite a bit.
What do you mean by the way it's worded?
Because it's only the first 500,000 that's exempt. And then from 835 to 860, you have a sliding scale, right? So you're still between 500,000 and 860, you're still paying property transfer tax. But it's where's the sliding scale between 835 and 860, which I guess determines, and they haven't announced this yet, what the sliding scale will be, but I'm assuming between 835 and 860 will be the determining percentage of 500,000 to 860.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. Yeah. Gentlemen, let's move on. Another developer files for bankruptcy, or I guess was foreclosed on is the correct language here. There was a project in Coquitlam at Lougheed and Blue Mountain called Horizon 21, and the developer was foreclosed on by the first mortgagee. A couple of interesting numbers here and just a little bit of background about this project. And then I want to talk to you about how do you protect pre-sale buyers, your pre-sale clients. So the story goes here. These guys launched sales in the late 2010s, 2020. The online articles telling us that they owed 7.7 million once they were foreclosed on, which had jumped to 8.6 million in April of 2023. The developer in question here was paying an 18% on their loan. So they were adding about $1 million in debt a year.
Yikes.
That is scary. And what's really unfortunate is for the people who bought into this project to not be knowing what's going on behind the scenes. I did have some contacts on the sales floor, and I guess it was a mainland Chinese family, a son and his mom, I guess sort of taking their first shot at the Canadian business scene with this. And this was supposed to be a 21-story tower with 142 condos, 8 townhomes. So once they, I guess they saw the writing was on the wall and they had to sell it, they listed the property for sale, but they didn't ask for a price. And now it's being foreclosed on, and the on the market It is listed for $16.8 million. A couple of more things here. The developer was previously in a lawsuit in 2018, and this was with New Stream Realty. And apparently, the two individuals at New Stream agreed to forego their commissions in exchange for receiving 4 penthouses and the right of refusal on 2 other units in the building. And once they got the heebie-jeebies about the project and thought it wasn't going to go forward, they then launched a court case, but I guess this was dismissed. The judge in that case said it was too premature. This is the same developer, by the way, that was in the news for these townhouses at Granville and Park, which were supposed to be concrete townhouses, but then at the last minute switched to wood frame townhouses. So this sounds like a Mickey Mouse developer, to say the least.
Yeah.
There have been a few other examples of developers going under. Atmosphere was a project in Richmond. The developer Coromandel, which has a number of projects on Cambie, ended up going belly up recently. What happens to buyers in this situation? Maybe Norm, just run us through what would happen to a buyer's deposit. And secondly, guys, how do you protect your clients? Because I think we have to discuss the implications of what this means to clients when they're out of the market for 3 years. Norm, go ahead and tell us about what happens to the money for your buyer.
What do you guys want to share on this? I'm not entirely sure. I haven't been through this process. I've recently had a terrible experience with a client purchasing with a small developer. It was a little 4-unit building. They bought 1 unit, and I told them not to. But again, low inventory. Their hands are tied. There's not much. It's either multiple offers over here. They chose to buy this one. We saw a ton of deficiencies, and it's been a nightmare. And other units are trying to sue the developer. I vow to myself, I'm not helping buyers anymore unless I feel confident with the developer. I don't want the headaches and sleepless nights. I won't do it.
Yeah, I think you want to make sure you go into a sales center represented by a realtor, not just going in. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm just walking off the street and I can write in because they have sales representatives in place. I can sign the paperwork. But the thing is, in having a realtor who understands how to do pre-sales now, that's my wife. She's done a lot more of this than I have, but she just says because all the contracts are written in a developer's favor, and so you need to be able to read those things and understand them because they're a lot different than normal contract of purchase and sale that we do for resale. And so understanding the terms and conditions in there to make sure that they have adequate insurance so that you can get your deposit back. Just in Langley and like Christian, what you're talking about with developers going under, Quarry Rock, they just had a big project, 87-unit townhouse complex here in Langley a couple months ago, going to receivership because they owe, I think it's $39.9 million. In that, and so they put the project's been frozen, but the good thing is all the people who've written on those places and have those places, they're getting their deposits back. I think from the insurance of of what was covered in there, but not all cases are the same with that, and so yeah, you just I think don't go in unrepresented is one of my biggest things because you may not know how to read a developer contract and understand all the terms in it. Try and find a realtor who does understand it.
EJ.
Yeah, so I think pre-sales can be very tricky because I think the developers and their sales team are actually they're very good representing the developers. So you go in, they have all the goods over there, they got the water, they got all of the snacks and everything, and they do a very good job of marketing the property. But what a lot of people don't understand is that, as some of you guys have mentioned already, is that sales team is representing the developer. As Tyson mentioned, that contract's completely different. And I've sat with my clients in pre-sales where they kind of went over the contract, and a lot of people are just kind of signing, right? You really want to have that realtor, your own realtor, to make sure you're understanding everything that you are signing, because that sales team isn't doing the big due diligence on your financial capability. They're looking at, do you have that deposit to be able to pay? And they're not even looking at your second or third deposit. If you have that, they're saying, show me your 5%, 10% first deposit, and we're good. You're bound to that contract, and your next one is in 4 months, 6 months from now. So you really want to be careful and to have that your own realtor to represent you. The other big one, as you guys kind of mentioned as well, is just who that developer is. The nice thing about, I'd say, the Greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley is that you can actually get a lot of good information from your realtor, from other brokerages, and there's, when you hear about a bad developer, it's not very hard to find. So having that due diligence and being able to find out who is doing that build is a huge one. And I often tell people, within that first, if there is a developer who it's their first time around, I just basically say, stay away. Like, we don't know what is going to happen. They've got good pricing, marketing looks great, but I wouldn't put you in a situation where you don't know if they're going to, finish that project, or what the finishings are going to be like.
Yeah, I think great points. I think the one that stands out for me is, and buyers need to know this, that yes, you do get your deposit back, right? Because that's held in trust. They would get your deposit back. But the implication of this is very, very serious. If you were looking to if you bought a 2-bedroom and you got it for $700 in this project, and now you get your deposit back and you're going back into the market with your same down payment, maybe you're buying that 2-bedroom at $850.
Yeah.
So you're playing catch up big time, and you've lost out on that $150,000 appreciation. So it's so important. I think all the guys are saying here that you be very careful about who the developer is, what their background is, and that this isn't their very first project, because they can be anybody. It can be a mom and her son who know nothing about business, who've been gifted a little bit by daddy, and they don't know how to liaise with city staff and to get permits and approvals and what's required in terms of getting big developers on to build out the site. It's a process. So obviously I feel for the buyers who bought into this thing.
Sorry, just a side question. Do you know, in the sales team, do they need to have a real estate license in order to sell at a sales center?
Does the sales team representing the developer have to have a real estate? That's the question? No,
Yes.
you don't have to have your own individual license.
That's right.
So
I just think about that too. When they're selling a property, they don't have the license to be able to sell real estate, so they're not always living in. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing for me that they're just solely representing the developer.
And another point, going back to what EJ said, which is very important, is that they're very good at what they do. And their job is
Their
to
marketing
meet
team.
certain sales benchmarks, right? The developer's got to get a loan from the construction loan from the bank. And to get that money released from the bank, they have to hit certain sales targets. It might be 60%, it might be 80% of the tower has to be sold out. Whatever the situation, that's their focus. And maybe, I don't know if they might cut corners, or they might, they might just say you need 10% deposit in some instances. And then, 2-3 years later, mortgage rates have changed, the project is delayed. I mean, how does this affect you? These are the kinds of considerations buyers really need to take in when they're going to a pre-sale site.
It always surprises me how many people go into a presentation center on the weekend, they sign the papers, months later or a year later, they contact me, hey, I kind of want to sell this thing. I'm like, well, what did you buy? And, you look at the contract and I ask, did you get a pre-construction rate hold? Nope, no rate hold. Rates have gone up. They didn't negotiate, the 2% lift. Most developers keep that in there, an assignment fee of 2%. You can negotiate that out, and it'll go down to usually $750 for family member, or whatever the number is that's negotiated. So now if you have to sell, it's an automatic 2% that you'll have to pay, and they don't have a pre-construction rate hold. it's very speculative. Everything is worded in the developer's favor. There's a ton of risk. Unless you're buying from a big developer that you know is going to be, has a reputation to keep, it's very risky. But those larger developers, they know that they're good. They know that they can deliver, and you're
Yeah.
typically paying a good sized premium for it.
And they're not over leveraging themselves either
Yeah.
when they're building the project.
EJ?
Yeah, and then what kind of Norm kind of mentioned in regards to the negotiating part, I mean, it all depends on the actual market, but developers don't like to change their pricing. They don't want to say, okay, I'm going to sell this to Norm for 500 and I'm going to sell this place to someone else because they negotiated for 470. But what they will do, depending on the market, if it's a bit of a slower market and they're really trying to meet their threshold to get their financing, is maybe they do throw in some incentives where they'll pay your maintenance fees for a year, or maybe there's like a $10,000 decorating allowance. All those things are kind of tough to negotiate, or some basically buyers don't negotiate at all because they don't even know they have that ability. Everything looks great when the developer presents it, but there are some areas that you can negotiate. And yeah, that's why it's nice to have your own realtor representing you when you go into a sales center there.
Mhm.
Question for you. And I do not know the answer to this, but if this developer were to, under a different numbered company, try and launch another project, let's say somewhere in New West, how do you ascertain that it's the same guy behind this project as it was behind that project?
Well, that's the thing, is I think I kind of mentioned before, I want to find out, and sometimes it's tough to, maybe a little bit challenging to find, to see if they have any kind of history, but you can straight up ask, like, what have you guys done in the past? They'll be like, oh, this is our first time. And I just tell my buyers, no, we're not doing it. Right. Or I don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable representing you. And if you are going through with it, these are the risks. And I lay it all out, because you don't know, like, that's something that is definitely possible, where a developer makes a new closes up their old kind of company, makes a new corporation, and here we go again. So that's something what I kind of recommend with buyers, who, even if it's a hot market, just to try to find something else that's more reputable, just so you can kind of decrease some of that risk.
Because do you guys recall, there was a number of years ago, maybe a half a dozen, there was a developer who ended up having his license to build revoked, I believe it was, by the city of Vancouver. And the reason given was that they cut down a tree that they weren't supposed to cut down. It just sounded ridiculous. So were they cutting down the tree on purpose because they didn't want to build, and they just wanted to sell the land? Because this was, I guess, back in the 2010s. And that same developer then relaunched a project downtown. I think Rennie was doing the marketing for it. I remember the sales presentation center was on Robson, but I don't recall now about the actual project. And I don't know that it went to head, but it wasn't obvious that it was the same developer. But through questioning and asking the staff,
Yeah.
like, what's their background, what other projects have they done, it sort of came out. And
Yeah, I think that something needs to happen with the regulations where there's a little bit more accountability tied to owners or corporations, instead of just dissolving a corporation and starting a new number and starting a new project in that way. But that's a BCFSA thing, or BC government thing that they need to work on and figure out. But that's a trickier solution, right? And like you're realizing that this is not real estate, but with overpass strikes, and it's been one company is responsible for 6 of the last 10 overpass strikes on our highways. And so they removed for Chohan, right? It was Chohan Freighters, and they removed their ability to operate in BC. But all they just did is transferred all of their trucks and trailers to their Alberta company, and so they can still operate in BC. And so they're still doing the exact same thing. They just transfer, and there needs to be some more accountability there that our government can do to fix situations like that for people exploiting the system.
sounds good, gentlemen. I think we'll leave it there for today. Everybody watching, if you want to reach out to the panelists, you can do that just by checking the show notes. You'll see their names, their contact numbers below. Guys, thanks for joining us for the Honest Hour, and we'll see everybody next time.